Hi there, everyone. This is John Isley from EWILogic.com. We're going to be looking at the beginning of designing your own custom logic performance environment for your EWI. So let's launch Logic and create a new empty project. We're going to create a software instrument. In my case, I have several of my EWI performances preset. So I'm just going to load the channel strip for an ES2 with one of my presets. And now I'm going to open the environment. We're going to go into the environment window. And I'm going to enlarge this so we can see it. And then here in the upper left-hand corner, I want to change this from the mixer to clicks and ports, which is this view. So when you first open the environment, what you see on the left-hand side, this area right here, is your physical MIDI input. It is your MIDI interface. In my case, I have an EMT8 with 8 ins and outs. So you see all the multiple ports in this area. The total output of that, the sum output, is leading into a keyboard object, which allows you to play notes from within the environment so you can see what the results of that will be as it goes through the environment. That is then connected to a monitor object, which allows you to monitor MIDI events. So notice as I play on the keyboard, not only do you hear the sound, but you also see the note ons and note offs and their relative volumes or velocities. And then that object is then connected to the sequencer input, which is, of course, where all of that information gets recorded. And that is the equivalent of looking at your tracks view in the arrange area. So this sequencer input is now leading to the soft lead instrument object here, which is record enabled. And then all of these items are in the path between the input and the sequencer input. So what we're going to do is we're going to start putting stuff in the way by building different objects in this area and putting them between the input object or the physical MIDI input and then the sequencer input. You can manipulate your incoming MIDI in pretty much any imaginable way that you can think of. So the first thing that I would like to do is, if you're following along with the tutorial from online, we're going to build the first object, which is a simple fader object that allows you to set an identity for the incoming channel. It doesn't have any physical purpose except as a visual cue or a visual aid to allow you to see what your channel strip is set to. So we're going to click on New. We're going to go to Fader, and we're going to select Text. And it drops this fader right here. I'm just going to move it down so that we can see our fader. And here is our fader with the default values of 0 to 127. If you click on this object, you see on the left-hand side the definitions for this object, the style of fader that it is. It's a text fader. What the output of this fader would be if it were connected to another object. In this case, it is set to a controller, a continuous controller, on MIDI channel 1, and it is set to send volume, which is controller number 7. This fader can also be controlled by an input. If you attach another object to it on its input side, on the left-hand side of this object, you could actually control this fader by using, again, controller number 7 on channel 1. And then the range of this fader has 0 to 127, or 128 possible positions of the fader, from 0 all the way to 127. The value is being displayed as a number. We're not filtering any of the MIDI information that's coming through, and we're going to leave the feedback turned off. So the first thing that we're going to do, because I like to see things consistently from one place to another, is we have to change the first 9 numbers of this from 0 or from single digits to double digits. Instead of 0, I want to see 0, 0. Instead of 0, 1, instead of 1, I want to see 0, 1. So we're going to accomplish that by double-clicking on our fader, and that opens up our information box for where we can set the value names for the fader. So if you double-click here, we're going to say 0, 0, and we're just going to keep going. 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, whoops, 0, 4, and so forth. This allows you to have a much cleaner display of your information so that you always know specifically what you're looking at. Now at this point you can also rename this if you want. And if you're following along in the tutorial, you'll notice that I had renamed this with simply the number sign to make it evident that that was what this fader was for, was just marking numbers. And so now, if we drag through our numbers, notice now that we have double digits for the first 9 numbers. And because it's still set to display all of its possible range, all 128 possible positions, once you reach 9, it then will continue with its default behavior from 10, 11, 12, so forth and so on. All right, excellent. Now, the next step is you may want to resize this to be a size that is more appropriate for what you're trying to do or where you want to put it. And we're going to recolor it, or we're going to color it. We're going to apply a color. If you hold down the Option key and tap the C key, it brings up your color palette. And now we have our text fader. So now, on all of my channel strips, I have this as the first object so that I can see what the incoming patch change number is that's controlling it. It's controlling that destination. Now, if you double-click on this again and you open that window back up, right up here we have something that says Behave as a Menu. And this is a great little tool in that instead of having to drag to select your menu, if you turn that on, you then get a pop-up, which allows you to move to whatever number you want and set that. And once you do that, it kind of changes the formatting of it. So if you want to make this just a little larger so it looks a little cleaner, you can do that. So one thing to be aware of when you finish this object, if you click on this object and you notice right here that its output and its input are based upon controls. So this is a continuous controller on channel 1, number 7, which means it will react to an input of volume, or it will send an output of volume. Controller number 7 on channel 1, whether it's going from its output or into its input. I can demonstrate this by connecting this to our monitor object, and as I drag this up and down, notice that it changes the numbers in our monitor. I'll move it over here so you can actually watch it happen. Watch the monitor as I change it. So it is now sent channel 1, controller number 7, at a value of 60. Channel number 1, controller number 7, a value of 41. Which means that anything that is attached to this is being affected by that volume output. If we look at our track view or our range view, you'll notice that our fader has now changed position. So I can demonstrate this by option clicking. I set this back to 0. We go back to our environment, and I'm going to set this value to, say, 50. So now this is sent on channel 1 a volume message of 50. If I go back to our arrange window, notice that this has now been changed to a volume of -10. So what this means is that if you want this object to have no effect, first of all, you would disconnect it from its target. And secondly, to not have it react to any incoming messages when it is packed into a macro, you should change these to non-used values. So I generally will change this to meta. I'll change both the output and the input to meta. I will also change them to channel 16 and a definition of 0. All of my null or unused objects get set to these settings so that I know that I generally will not use a meta value on channel 16 of 0 in any way. It's my personal organizational system to ensure that these work correctly. That brings us to the end of our first object. Congratulations, you have created an identifiable slider that will allow you to identify an incoming MIDI parameter. Stick around for part 2.